Fantastic. Can everybody hear me all right? Excellent. So we're going to kick this off. We're going to get started. My name is Josh Ranoa. I am with Red Hat. I'm part of the Open Innovation Labs. I'm a client advocate. I was going to change my title to Client Innovation Advocate so I could be part of the CIA, but at least for this group. And today we have an awesome panel that we're going to be talking about how to actually bring DevOps as a reality. Bringing this down. DevOps, you guys saw on the big screen all these huge buzzwords, right? Well, how do I tactically take these buzzwords down? How do I implement these things into my organization? It's going to be the focus of today. And again, we have a fantastic set of panelists who have all implemented DevOps at their organizations, both on a small scale as well as on a large scale. How do I actually bring this out to a larger scale? So joining us today, I have Simmons Lough. Simmons is with the Patent and Trademark Office. We have David Gray, Social Security Administration. We have Jen Hoover, again, DHS. Department of Homeland Security, and we also have Steve Grunch, Department of Homeland Security, part of Citizenship and Immigration. And we're going to kind of dig into this. So to kind of kick this off, I'm going to ask the panelists, if we wouldn't mind. Simmons, I'll start with you. We kind of run down the panel here. If you can give a little bit of background about yourself, share a little bit of history of how you got into DevOps, and kind of what you're doing today.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Good morning, everyone. As Josh said, I'm Simmons. I work at the Patent and Trademark Office. I work in a department called Office of Financial Management Systems under the CFO. My formal title is I'm the tech lead for a next-gen system called FP&G. That stands for Fee Processing Next Generation. It's a replacement or a next-gen system for an older system we've had for decades that was called RAM. FP&G is sort of the front end that our customers use when applying for a patent and a trademark. Some of you may know this, the patent office is self-funded. We take all of our money or all of the revenue we collect is from the fees that we charge for the patent and trademarks. And FP&G is the system that collects those fees, and it's a little bit north of $3 billion per year.
Ooh, awesome, thank you. Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave. Work at the Security Administration. I'm the director of the Division of Infrastructure Services. I'm really coming into this from the infrastructure side. So I'm in the middle of taking our organization, sort of reorganizing a lot of our infrastructure stuff, trying to bring it into a more cloud-first, cloud-native organization, and really trying to push a lot of that innovation from that side. With that, we're working a lot with the DevOps teams, really trying to enable them and allow them to move forward as we go through our IT modernization process.
Perfect. Go for it, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Hoover with the Department of Homeland Security at headquarters under the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. I grew up in DHS, started at Customs and Border Protection doing the DevOps integration, and then moved on to TSA to help with their IT modernization. Now I'm lucky enough to be in the Chief Technology Officer's office doing innovation and bringing innovation into headquarters and helping to implement that IT modernization with a focus on DevOps and implementing innovation as part of that.
Yes, good morning. My name is Steve Grunch. I'm the branch chief for Enterprise Cloud Services at USCIS. And basically what we do is we manage we have a program where we manage our public cloud infrastructure. We basically do the contracting, we set up the infrastructure, we provide the tools necessary for our development teams to put their applications into public cloud environments. Part of that program is to develop platforms for the application developers, and that does include the OpenShift container platform. That's part of our newest one, and then we have some other platforms and tools that we're using for our data platforms.
Awesome, fantastic. You guys, thanks for the quick introduction. And being a part of the Innovation Lab, I realize there's a lot of components. You guys saw them up on the board. People, process, technology that gets dragged along here, right? And I don't know if you guys heard in these introductions. These are all folks coming from different areas. Engineering, business operations, development, overall strategy. Why don't we bring this down a second? Let me ask you guys. Why don't we set a foundation? How do you guys define DevOps? Let's set this up for the rest of the groups. We all get on the same foundation. Jen, you want to start?
Absolutely. DevOps, to me, so many times I've been at panels and on conferences, and people talk about DevOps in a very technological way, where it's focused on technology. But DevOps is so much bigger than technology. DevOps is about people, processes, technology, bringing that all together, and then looping in innovation as part of that, so that way we can move better and faster, so we can deliver the mission to our customers. So I always think of DevOps mostly as a people-centric focus. And at the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, we try to make sure that the people are first and foremost, and make sure that we can bring innovation to the department as an enterprise.
Yeah, good answer. It's funny how much the culture really needs to be changed and how difficult that can be. Steve, how do you define DevOps?
Sure. Yeah, I just define it as a culture of collaboration just between different groups. Whether that is the traditional developers and operations, or whether it's between the business and the IT organization. A lot of my thoughts and a lot of my leadership comes from my boss, Mark Schwartz. I worked under him, and this idea that the business and IT are two separate entities within the same group.
Sure.
Needs to change, right? We're all the same company. We're all trying to move in the same direction, and we're trying to meet outcomes for our business. And that's kind of where I look at it. And so when we talk about collaboration between different groups, it could be the technologist, but it can also be maybe a procurement and legal. Maybe it's contracting and one of the program offices, et cetera, right? All of us have the ability to collaborate with each other. We all have the ability to establish relationships with counterparts in different parts of our organizations. And we really can't do the jobs that we need to do and deliver the outcomes unless those relationships are in place.
Makes sense. I mean, let's break down those silos and open up communication. Dave?
So I wish I could say I thought of this myself, but one of my coworkers said, DevOps is really just another term for common sense. It's bringing the group together, allow them all to talk to each other, figure out the common sense solutions, implementing them, and moving them forward. A lot of this, trying to define it for ourselves, has been one of our big challenges. We went out, we just did a big DevOps project. It was very successful, and it was a great project. They're really making a lot of momentum, getting a lot of great things. But what they did is they had a big project, it's kind of independent from everybody else. They got a whole big bunch of, got a lot of money, they got a lot of great technical people, put them all in a room together, said, okay, go work on this and don't work on anything else. And they did great things. What we're trying to struggle with now is trying to figure out how we can take that and apply it and scale it up across our board. We can't have every project get $300 million. We can't have every project get 10 great system admins and 5 other technologists coming in there to talk to it. At some point, we have to figure out how we're going to go through there, scale it up, and allow every project to gain the benefits of DevOps, even if they don't have the money and the people to really implement it the way that everyone else did. So it's really trying to figure out how we can do that, how we can move forward, and sort of get everyone on board with this DevOps process.
Makes sense. I love common sense. Simmons?
Yeah, those were all good. I think, I guess the saying goes, right, if you ask 4 different people involved in DevOps what DevOps is, you get 4 different answers, and mine's probably going to be a little different. I like to concentrate on continuous delivery, and maybe really what I'm describing is continuous delivery, but I kind of look at it as fast, frequent deployments to production without taking shortcuts. And I'm talking about the application that's delivering value to the customers. Frequent and fast, relative terms, right? But I'm talking maybe minutes, hours, maybe days, but not months or quarters or years. And I've also had people say, what do you mean taking shortcuts, Simmons, right? I think it's sort of this pendulum, and I'll speak mainly from the federal government. I think like in the 80s, right, you had a developer that wrote some code, compiled it, and then put it on a production site, and it brought the entire data center down, right? That's not what we're doing. That's fast and frequent, but there's no rigor, right? There's shortcuts. And so at least my perspective is we want to go through the same rigor, but just do it a different way, And largely the answer is through automation so that you can go at that high velocity.
Makes a ton of sense. I know at Innovation Labs, we always like to focus on delivering the same kind of business value and helping customers figure out how to do that, right? So let's start there. When you guys think back on your experience, when the actual decision was made, we're going to transform this culture, we're going to transform this organization, what were the reasons behind that? Why did your organization decide to tackle this? Because it's huge. Simmons, you want to start?
Yeah, I guess first clarification, we didn't do it at an organization level. We did it down at the system level, my system. And that's actually part of my recommendation, I think, is sort of instead of biting the whole elephant at once, if that's the right phrase, but sort of system by system. And what we realized, just sort of looking back historically, was that, software changes would happen. I mean, we were lucky if it was every quarter with the old systems, right? And we also needed, I guess I'll also mention this. We also needed a way, there was sort of this, a lot of times you'll see in the federal government, it's like there's this process for putting out a new release. And it's this huge classic SDLC that's, 400 pages long. But if there's a problem in production, you can do it expedited or an emergency release, right? Where you don't follow any of the rigor and you just put it into production. And our thought was like, no, we want to be able to hotfix or fix the system quickly, but still with all the same rigor. And so part of it was like, we want every change to follow the exact same process.
Awesome, being able to move quickly and agile, that's huge. Dave?
A lot of this was just coming out and seeing how, let's take a step back here. We started out, we're a very siloed organization. Everything we did was vertically aligned. You had somebody ran the mainframe, they had a mainframe group, there was a storage group assigned to that mainframe group. Everything was all based on that technology silo. And that worked great as long as your entire application fit within that silo. What we were finding is that as time went on, more and more things, we were trying to break across those silos, and it became extraordinarily difficult just to maintain and to do operations. If you had an issue, all of a sudden now we're doing Tiger teams with 100 people on the phone. Everyone's looking at each other going, do you know how this one works? So like, no one really knew. You're sitting there trying to figure this all out. And you really lost a lot of that just because everything was so siloed. A lot of this was trying to come out and sort of do that horizontal slant across and try to figure out how you're doing services and how you're doing these things and supporting these applications so that everything's a little bit easier to organize, a little easier to understand what's going on, and have some touch points where you can kind of break apart how all that operational responsibility lies. So we're doing that. At the same time, we're really trying to get to the point that, if you release an application once every year, well, there's a lot of changes going on there. If you can release an application every once in a while, every couple of weeks, there's a lot of little changes. There's not as much that's going to break. And if there is something that breaks, you at least know kind of it's one of these 4 things that changed, and you can really focus in on that. And so those are a lot of the reasons we really tried to get towards that. And just the things you need to automate. We just don't have the time and energy to handcraft servers, to handcraft infrastructure, handcraft any of this stuff. We really need a mechanism to go out there and just build it once, put the time and effort to do it right once, and have that automation so they can kick out and give the exact same thing time and time and time again.
Yeah, it's amazing. You break down the communication barriers of these silos, what kind of skill sets you get and how fast you can move when you can turn to them and say, hey, did you realize this is broken? Exactly. How about you, Jim?
I think it started with executive management realizing that our budgets were shrinking and the mission needs still had to be met every day. Especially when I was at CBP, the focus was so heavily mission-oriented, and the mission can at times be life or death for Border Patrol agents and for custom situations. So for whenever I first started down the DevOps path, it was a buzzword. At the end of the day, it was just a cool buzzword that industry was touting, and executive management looked at it and was just like, maybe we need to look into this. So I ended up getting into it and reading the Phoenix Project, because who hasn't? And as I was reading it, I was just like, man, this is my organization. It's kind of siloed.
That's my life.
This is a long time ago. But it was siloed, and we understand that we have to meet the mission. We had to meet the needs, and we had to do it with a shrinking budget. So starting small and doing things like automating and making it go faster, so that way the developers could really push their code through faster in a standardized, focused way, and being able to push to production faster and more securely, and focusing on not only DevOps, but DevSecOps, and putting that in place, which is really important from the get-go, and being able to wrap all of those things to meet mission needs.
Well, I'm starting to see a kind of a common theme here. I mean, it's starting small. It's starting from someone who sees a problem and they want to fix it, right? Not necessarily being pushed down from the top, right? How about you, Steve?
So, yeah, from a personal perspective, I got involved in DevOps, probably, 4 years ago or so. I was a software release manager, and we were trying to push code, up through to production. And, after a few times of your software release candidate being stuck in a system integration environment, waiting for the test people to go through their, requirements matrix and things like that, you realize that there's a better way to do it, right? There are automated ways to do it. You can derive your tests or write your tests before the actual application code gets written. So from that perspective, from the development perspective, that's kind of where I came into it. However, as I moved up, as a project manager, or program manager, there are business reasons why we decided to use DevOps at USCIS. And, as we have kind of alluded to in the conversation, is that there were business outcomes that we wanted that we were not getting using either the traditional project management methods or the traditional business or the traditional deployment methods of software. And DevOps and Agile and the lean software manufacturing, if you will, the principles of that gave us the ability to deliver the business outcome that we were looking for our agency. At USCIS in particular, there was a mandate from Congress to increase basically the number of cases that the agency was processing. And anyway, that kind of triggered a project to start within one of our groups. And so we started with that, and then once we were able to show results from that, the business outcomes that they actually wanted, then we were able to start moving it to different groups. So the last project that kind of culminated all of this was our OCP platform deployment. And in that one, we brought kind of all of these lessons learned together. We had folks from the dev side, the ops side, security. There were some folks that were involved in the procurement of it and contracting that all came together to kind of put it together. As it was mentioned in the first portion of it, we did the war room exercise where we brought everybody together for a couple weeks, and we were able to turn this around and get it done.
So, Steve, question on that. You mentioned a lot about business value there. When you say you brought in the contract, you brought in procurement, what happened there? How did you get these business people involved?
So, from a government perspective, we can't just go out and buy software off the street, right? We have to go through a third party. We have to go through our contract office in order to make that procurement. And so getting them involved early, getting them on board with what the priority of it was and how important it was for the agency allowed us to work with them and work with the specialists in the contract office that knew how to get those things done.
I guess the word DevOps should be expanded to like Dev, Con, Sec, Ops, all across the board, right? Procurement. So, well, awesome. So how do we get started? So when you guys are talking about getting the reasons why, how do you start this process, right? Because you need support from all of these different areas. How did you guys go about getting support? Simmons, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So at least on FP&G, it started off as a grassroots effort. It was the application team, in this case FP&G, sort of partnering with the group that handled the CI/CD, so like the automated pipeline. And I guess we were pretty lucky that a lot of that infrastructure of automated pipelines and even sort of, we have a data center in-house, but the cloud sort of capabilities, that all existed. But many of the processes were still legacy, for lack of a better word.
Makes sense.
And so we sort of, pushed hard internally on automated testing, unit testing, static analysis, sort of, I can go on and on with the automation. But it was kind of, again, it was grassroots and a little bit of like sort of, we're rule breakers types, right? Which I think worked initially. And then at some point, we had to go and get executive sponsorship, right? And this was a joint policy that was signed by the CIO and the CFO for a pilot, right? And that word, I mean, it's kind of the oldest sales trick, right? Like, it's just a pilot. It was just a pilot. It was just one system, and it was only for hot fixes. So we were only allowed to deploy on will for problems that currently existed in production. Right, and I think sort of the organizations in charge of the SDLC were okay with that because it was just hot fixes and just this system. And I think over time, this was really fascinating. That we went through that pilot for 9 or 12 months. Doing deployments, no outages. We weren't breaking anything. The data center wasn't coming down, and I think folks started to trust us and realize that we weren't these bad boys. We wanted to do all of the same stuff. We just had a different approach for it. And so we collected tons of metrics, almost too much of how many deployments, how long, just every sort of metric we could have, and then had a success story to show that was backed up with data, and then went back to the executives and said, hey, we want to do this, not just for hot fixes, but for everything, small change, large change. I mean, we'll call it whatever you want, right? But every software change we now roll out, it's been about 6 months now since we call it DevOps Phase 2. And we roll everything out the same way, whether it's a small change or a large change. And interestingly enough, sort of part of that policy then also expanded so that it wasn't just one system. Each system had to opt into it, right? So if you've got the automated tests and you've got all these things wired up, you can opt in. If not, you can still sort of do the historic way. So it's kind of sort of a stepping stone process, system by system.
Okay, so it sounds like you got the operational piece under there. Now, when did you start engaging with the development side? Is that still in phase 2?
No. Well, in this case, up here on this panel, I represent the developers, right? So the developers were baked in throughout. Like they were leading the charge with us. I guess one nuance, I don't know if other places do this way, but we've got the infrastructure team and the data center team, and in my view, their responsibility is to keep the data center and the infrastructure up. But within FP&G, we sort of align around the product. And as part of that, we've got dev folks, ops folks, a lot of sort of interaction, but we're all in it together, again, sort of aligned around the product.
Now, was that part of the journey? Did you guys transform to start aligning around the product, or was it?
Yeah, so that was part of the journey. I mean, I think folks were mentioning the silos, and that's not uncommon, but one of the things that my division did in the CFO is that we used to have, we had one group that was in charge of all new projects, right? And so maybe we've got 10 or 15 financial systems in my department. And one group was building all the systems, and another group was in charge of operating all the systems, right? And we about 6 months ago did a realignment where let's align around the product. So there's people, in this division, like my division's in charge of the revenue collection, right? So there's folks that are doing operations, there's folks that are doing development, there's folks that are doing security. But again, it's like, I guess, you hear it I think it's in the DevOps handbook about this term of the E-shaped resource or a T-shaped resource. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, where folks are not just, like no one I think on my team would say, I'm cybersecurity, I'm a developer. You would first say, I'm FP&G, and oh, by the way, my specialty is Java, right? Yeah. And that's been very beneficial for us.
Awesome. And just to reiterate, how far along are you in this process? When did you guys start?
Oh, yeah. So I think we probably uttered the word DevOps at my system probably about 3 years ago. Okay. And what I've described, we are fully up and running, sort of doing it. Are we Google? Are we Netflix? No. But while I'm up here, there's four production deployments planned this morning. That's certainly not unheard of. And yeah, we have a blue-green infrastructure, no outages. It's actually works.
Awesome. Good to have you on the panel.
Yeah.
So Dave, from a kind of an opposite perspective, you're coming from the engineering side.
Yeah.
How'd you tackle this?
Well, so really it started out really on the development side, and really when they started going to the agile processes. And so they started going agile, started developing in agile. We've had another group going out there on the more the development side, building out that pipeline, building out the the Jenkins builds and how all that stuff's going to come together and how we're bringing this all out and how we're going to deploy into production. But it was still following the same system lifecycle, and it wasn't working. And even we had this, we had another project go out and they did their DevOps stuff, and they said, okay, we're DevOps and we know what we're doing, and it just wasn't working because he didn't have the infrastructure really brought in and tied into the group. So one of the examples I have is they did their DevOps process, they deployed to production, they're like, we're great, we're fantastic. We set up monitoring for them every day. We sent them a report at 6 a.m., said everything's good. Day 3, we send the report, everything's good. We send that at 6, 7 o'clock, all of the users started calling in saying, hey, nothing's working. And so we, helped them. We restarted all the services, got everything up and running. The next morning, same thing happened. And they kind of look at us and go, well, what's going on? You told us everything's good. And we go, yeah, we're infrastructure. We told you all the servers are up and running. We're not monitoring your services. Your services are all down. You guys are supposed to be doing that. You're the ops team. And so there's a lot of this learning curve just trying to go in there that we're all sort of pointing fingers at each other. We don't have that communication. And I haven't said this yet, but it's one of my key things. The technology is really easy. The people are hard. And so you have the people, they don't understand what's going on. They're not talking to each other. And so we kind of realized, okay, this isn't really working. The same point in our life cycle, the Agile project's coming through. Nothing was working really well because we're extremely siloed. The people doing sysadmin on our dev environment and our validation environment, we're a completely different group and a completely different organization than the people who do integration and production. So you have the agile teams are doing their stuff. They throw into the waterfall process. They get it working kind of in dev, kind of in val. Things kind of are all there. Then they throw it over to integration, and it all starts over from scratch again. So things just didn't move smoothly. So what we tried doing is sort of recognizing what's going on there. We did a reorganization of the infrastructure groups. And so we started pulling all the people together and said, it doesn't make sense to have these silos everywhere. Let's go ahead and do standardized infrastructure. Let's put an infrastructure group together that's doing all of our cloud infrastructure, all of our virtualized x86 Linux environment, and let them run all of their stuff through the entire life cycle. Let's take the sysadmin groups. Let's try to get them working together, and so that system admin and dev and system admin and production know exactly what the other ones are doing. We're still working towards getting those groups unified so there's even one system admin taking us through the entire life cycle and letting everything sort of work together so that those DevOps teams, as they develop things, as they put their code out, we can stop going out of this waterfall process and actually have this automated deployment and with groups knowing what's going on and understanding how all these applications work and are really supporting them and those DevOps teams from start to finish.
So as you guys reorganized, did you do something similar to Simmons where you guys started putting yourselves map to product, or how were you guys set up?
Well, we're still at the infrastructure layer and to a lesser extent than like Simmons is talking about. So what we're doing is we're trying to focus at the various levels. So we've got right now trying to do that cloud infrastructure group that's really just handling, making sure that cloud infrastructure, whether on-prem, in the cloud, wherever, offers those services and bringing out that automated sort of exposing the APIs of what they'll allow through to the next group. And we have a system admin group that's really working at that layer to provision that hardware below that and trying to work with the teams in order to get things working at the system admin layer. On top of that, we have got people that we're starting to bring up, and this is where we're not that far down the journey, so we're still trying to figure out how we're going to work with those layers, actually implement them on the various DevOps teams, and how those people are going to cut across the infrastructures and across all the various areas to bring them together and make sure we can really support those teams and give the DevOps team the ability to really go out there and do everything they need to do to deploy to production.
Oh, fantastic. And again, how far along are you?
We've been doing DevOps for a little over a year on a couple isolated projects, and then trying to bring everything up to speed. We just started in the last month or so a big, huge project that's really going out there trying to define what DevOps means to us at enterprise level.
Makes sense. As you guys have started to see this evolution of breaking down into cross-functional teams that are supported with everybody talking. And how about you, Jen?
I really love the term grassroots because I'm so people-centric, and my entire career working in the DevOps world has been focused on people and training people and having collaboration and communication. So I like that grassroots movement where you find like-minded individuals who want to do something new and cool and innovative, and getting those people on board to be part of this grassroots movement to create that groundswell. So in my experience, finding other people who are like-minded, who want to share that enthusiasm for this DevOps buzzword movement that's happening, it's challenging, don't get me wrong, but finding those people and getting them on board and then collaborating and communicating across the organization. And now I'm very fortunate to be at the headquarters level where we can find like-minded people in not only headquarters but across the components as well, and create communities of practice. I know a lot of the components have communities of practice within their own component, but then bringing that all together and having them share lessons learned and best practices and finding those like-minded people. And if one component is much further behind in their DevOps journey, working with a component like USCIS that is much further along to help share that and share information. So I'm very fortunate to be in a place now where I can share and help disseminate the information and the collaboration across all of the enterprise. So it starts from that groundswell and that grassroots movement at maybe one component like USCIS and bringing it upwards and meeting in the middle. So you're also bringing it from the enterprise level down and creating that groundswell.
Like-minded people. I think Simmons called them bad boys. Isn't that what you called them? No, that makes sense. And so if we dig into it just a little bit more, how do you actually tactically scale that, right? Because you're responsible for scaling this out in the organization itself. What are some of the key elements there?
It's cultural, it's people, and at headquarters in CTO, we like to call us maverick innovators, not bad boys.
Mavericks, I like that.
That's better.
So one of the things we do is create that community of practice and bring in the people who are very interested. And so it allows us to scale and allows people to go back and bring ideas and different thoughts on how their organization can do things better. And then at headquarters, we are able to step in and provide guidance and focus and help create, for example, we have we do have a DevOps community of practice, previously called an IPT, where we talked about metrics and how do you measure that and how do we help organizations measure that. So being able to scale that based on solid data and sharing best practices, like what does a great CI/CD pipeline look like, or how do we deploy, what are the gates that still need to be in place, and sharing that information across the board. Whenever I started at CBP, it was, like Simmons said, it's starting with a very small system and a small group and taking it from there and building it upward. So then from the headquarters perspective, it's disseminating that information out and sharing it as an enterprise community. So it kind of comes up and down and meeting in the middle somewhere. And then, like I said, finding the maverick innovators.
No, that makes sense. It's amazing how the teams, every one individual becomes a marketer, right? And having the metrics to back it up, say, hey, look how cool I'm doing. Look at the stuff I did. And look how fast I did it and how quality the code is. Well, we got a couple minutes left, and I want to give you guys each an opportunity to kind of share what's the most important thing. To the crowd out here, what do these guys need to leave this room with that you guys feel are key elements to get started or to look out for? Steve?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that has been touched on today quite a bit is obviously leadership or management directorate to implement a lot of these policies and a lot of these changes, right? If you don't have your CIO or CTO support in implementing these changes, implementing the policies, it's very, very difficult to get it moving. The other thing I would say is that the results that you achieve through DevOps is directly related to the teams that are implementing them. So one of the things that we found, obviously, is that when we put together a team for a certain project or I'll say product, like the OpenShift platform or one of our other applications, and that is how we've kind of modeled our DevOps practices as around a product or a platform. We've put together teams of people that, one, have worked together before. So in the case of the OpenShift platform, it was myself, Rob Brown was our development lead, and then I was the operations lead, and then we had another coworker that was the security lead. And all of us were in the same war room together. We all contributed to the project, and that is what gave us the result. But before that, we had started that project. We had all worked together before on different things within the organization. We kind of knew what to expect from each other, and we were able to trust each other to deliver those results. And that was a huge factor in being able to deliver something in a few weeks' time. And I've also noticed this when I do tech demos and things like that with our contractors, is that when a team comes in to do a tech demo that's worked together before, it's the difference between night and day of a team that just got assembled the night before, right? So
Absolutely.
I would say that would be a key takeaway for this process.
Fantastic. Jen?
Piggybacking off of what Stephen said is that collaboration piece. I mean, he described people from multiple different groups coming together and working together in a war room. So it's all about that collaboration and communication and being able to open that up and provide the transparency into what you're doing. Having that and the right people in place, those maverick innovators in place, being able to share best practices and lessons learned, and knowing that they want to move the organization forward is so important, because at the end of the day, the mission is about the people. It's about bringing those people together to meet mission needs and meet mission requirements. So collaboration and communication, and then having a good strategy to scale that up to an enterprise level.
Awesome. Dave?
So the people who you work with every day, they know the challenges. The people who are doing the job, they know what doesn't work and what does work. They're the ones you need to get in that room and just ask them, what do we need to do to move this forward? How do we improve things? And let them come with those solutions. And you really have to go out there and enable your teams to come up with the solutions and allow them to figure out how to move this forward and how they can own this process. If they own the process, they become part of the solution, and then they become the evangelists. They're the ones going out there and saying this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Forcing it down their throats sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. Depends on how you do it. But if you can get some of those people who are, on the opposite side of the spectrum, you've got the people who are going to be gung-ho and go for anything. Sometimes if you can get that person who's reluctant, who doesn't want to change, who doesn't want to do this, get them involved, really make them part of the solution. You get them turned, then everyone else goes, well, if this guy thinks this is the greatest thing, then obviously they're onto something, and sort of use that to your advantage. So you know your people, you sort of have to trust them, sort of figure out how to do this and move forward, and that's really my best advice.
I'm okay on time?
Oh, yeah.
All right, good.
Sim, you got 3 minutes to take it all.
All right, okay. 3 minutes. I got two things. The first is automated testing. People's eyes glaze over when I talk about automated testing. I guess I'm going to be as bold to say if you don't do automated testing, you cannot do DevOps. You can't move at the speed, you can't do the frequency if you don't have automated tests. And I'm going to bore you, right? But it's automated unit tests, it's automated functional tests, it's automated security tests, it's automated performance tests, it's automated 508 tests. The list goes on and on. And it's not easy, right? There's stuff, it's not easy. I think historically, sometimes with automated testing in general, it's like sometimes the A team's not put on it. And in this case with DevOps, you've got to have the A team. You're basically building a system that's just as complicated as the system. You're building a system to test another system, and they're equally complicated, right? Understanding how to write idempotent tests, atomic, doing mocks. Not fun topics, but critical to doing DevOps. Second thing is, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but starting small. I think, I've from time to time, I've sort of given talks like this before, and I'll have other feds come up to me, right? Feds, that's the word. Other feds come up to me. I look like a classic fed, don't I? Sorry. These feds will come up to me and say, "Hey, Simmons, I want to do DevOps." And I was pitching it to my boss, but they came back and said, "Well," in the case that rings in my head, it was like, "How do you do database changes on a third normal form database?" And it's like, and the boss, I think, came and said, "Hey, once you figure that out, come back to me. And once you have the whole plan, we'll do DevOps," right? And that's an anti-pattern, right? It's like, what's the one piece you can do, right? All right, let's try to do DevOps for changes that don't involve a database or whatever. There's ways to cut it down so that, again, you're not taking on the whole thing at once, step by step. Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely, that's a great point. So some common messages I'm hearing. Start small, right? Get your bad boys or your evangelists, right? And open up those, break those silos down for communication. Well, awesome. I want to say thank you very much to all the panelists. You guys, it was fantastic being up here. You guys, great message. Hopefully this was useful to everyone out on in the floor. I'll put a quick plug if you guys want to continue this. I know Innovation Labs is going to be doing another presentation here at 11. Definitely join it. It'll continue on this, on how to make it a reality. And again, thank you very much.